You know what terrifies me? The fact that right now, as you're watching this video, colon cancer has quietly become the number one cancer killer for people between ages 20 and 49. Yes, that young. Let that sink in for a moment. Not lung cancer, not breast cancer, colon cancer. And here's what makes this even more heartbreaking. It's one of the most preventable cancers we know of, but only if we catch it early enough. I need to share something with you today that, honestly, it keeps me up at night because a friend of mine had a brother who was only 34 years old and he died of colon cancer. Even today, I cannot get over that. The rates of colon cancer in young people have doubled over the past few decades. Yes, you heard right. I said doubled. We're talking about people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who historically never had to worry about this disease. But times have changed, and we need to change with the times. Now, before you think this is going to be one of those doom and gloom health talks, let me give you some hope. When colon cancer is caught early and is still localized, the 5-year survival rate is an incredibly 91%. That's phenomenal. But here's the devastating reality. If we miss those early signs and it spreads to our other organs, that survival rate plummets all the way down to just 13%. The difference between catching this early and catching it late is literally the difference between life and death. So today I'm going to walk you through the warning signs your body might be giving you. Signs that are easy to dismiss but could be trying to save your life. And I'm asking you a favor. If you find this information valuable, please share it with someone you love. Share it with your parents, your siblings, and your friends. Early detection does not just improve outcomes, it saves lives. Let me start by explaining what we are actually dealing with here. Colon cancer starts in your large intestine, or colon. Now, here's something fascinating that most people don't know. This cancer almost always begins as something completely harmless. Just a little benign polyp, which is a small growth that poses no threat whatsoever. But over time, some of these polyps can transform into something dangerous. The beautiful thing is that if we catch these polyps early, they can be removed easily during a routine colonoscopy. In fact, colon cancer is one of the very few cancers where the screening test and the treatment can happen at the exact same time. How incredible is that? But here's the problem. Most of these early polyps don't cause any symptoms. They're silent, they're growing, potentially changing, and you feel absolutely fine. That's why knowing the warning signs is so crucial, because by the time your body starts telling you something's wrong, it's important to listen immediately. So let's talk about what your body might be trying to tell you, starting with one of the most common early warning signs that people tend to brush off way too easily. I'm talking about changes in your bowel habits. Now, I know this isn't the most glamorous topic to discuss, but please stay with me because this could be the difference between life and death. Have you suddenly started experiencing constipation when there's never been an issue for you before? Or maybe you're dealing with frequent loose stools or diarrhea that seems to come out of nowhere. Here's the thing. Having diarrhea or constipation for a week or even 2 weeks is actually pretty common and usually nothing to worry about. We eat something that does not agree with us, we go through a stressful period, and our system gets a little off track. And that's normal. But if these changes persist for longer than a few weeks, you need to pay attention. Your colon has a very specific job to do. It absorbs water from your digestive waste and forms stool. When there's a tumor or mass disrupting this process, it's going to show up in how your bowel functions. It's just as simple as that. But let me explain how this works because Understanding the mechanism makes it easier to recognize. When colon cancer causes diarrhea, it's because that growth or mass is irritating the lining of your bowel. This irritation triggers your intestine to secrete more waste, more water, and speeds up how fast everything moves through your system. The result? Chronic diarrhea that just won't quit no matter what you eat or what over the counter remedies you try. Constipation works differently. This typically happens when a tumor creates a physical roadblock, literally blocking or slowing down the passage of stool through your colon. And here's a particularly concerning pattern to watch for if you're experiencing bouts of diarrhea and constipation, going back and forth between the two. Yes, sometimes diarrhea, sometimes constipation. This could actually signal that a cancer growth is intermittently obstructing your colon. Sometimes the stool can get past and sometimes it can't. So that's why you will have both. And it creates this frustrating cycle. Now, speaking of signs that people often dismiss, let's talk about something that should never be ignored, and that's unexplained weight loss. And when I say unexplained, I mean you haven't changed your diet. You haven't started a new exercise routine. You're not trying to lose weight, but the pounds are just falling off anyway. Colon cancer causes weight loss through two really fascinating but disturbing mechanisms. First, this cancer can physically interfere with how your intestine absorbs nutrients. You're eating the same amount of food, but your body is not getting the nutrition it needs because the cancer is disrupting normal absorption. But here's where it gets even more sinister. Many cancers, including colon cancer, actually hijack your body's resources to fuel their own growth. These cancer cells release substances called cytokines that basically manipulate your body's signaling systems. They redirect nutrients away from your healthy cells toward the cancer cells instead, feeding the tumor while starving your body. It's like having an invasive parasite that's stealing your nutrition right out from under your nose. So if you notice that you're losing weight without any good reason, this absolutely needs to be evaluated, not just for colon cancer, but for other cancers as well. Now, let me address something that makes a lot of people kind of uncomfortable, but is absolutely critical to discuss, and that's blood in your stool. It's actually one of the hallmark signs of colon cancer. But here's what I need you to understand before you start to panic. The most common causes of blood in your stool are actually not related to cancer at all. Hemorrhoids are by far the most frequent culprit. Another fairly common cause is a condition called diverticulosis, which my dad had before he passed away. This is when small pouches develop in the walls of your intestine, and sometimes these pouches bleed or become infected. These are much more common than colon cancer. But, and this is crucial, you cannot assume that any bleeding is just hemorrhoids. I don't care if you've had hemorrhoids before. I don't care if bleeding seems to match up with straining during a bowel movement. Anytime you notice blood in your stool, in the toilet bowl, or on the toilet paper after wiping, you need to get checked by a doctor to rule out something more serious. Better to feel a little silly going to the doctor for hemorrhoids than to ignore the early stages of cancer. And while we're on this topic, let me tell you about a related symptom that's equally important, and that's dark or black stools. Now, this is also caused by bleeding, but the dark color tells us something specific about where that bleeding is coming from. When blood appears black in your stool, it's because the source of bleeding is typically somewhere higher up in your digestive system, like your stomach or small intestine. As the blood travels along your GI tract, it interacts with digestive chemicals and enzymes, and this interaction is what changes the color from bright red to dark black. It's actually a clue that helps doctors figure out where the problem might be located. But here's what complicates things. This dark blood can also come from the colon itself, specifically from the ascending colon, which is located on the right side of your abdomen. So while black stools usually point to an issue in the stomach, they can also indicate a bleeding source in the colon that needs to be evaluated for cancer. Don't make assumptions. Get it checked. And speaking of taking control of your health, especially as we get older, if you're interested in learning more about natural ways to support your body's healing processes after you turn 40 and beyond, I've got a great resource for you. I created a comprehensive guide titled Healing Over 40 Using Natural Remedies. All 36 chapters are jam-packed with everything you need to help improve your health. There is one chapter specifically about cancer and healing herbs and how they work together. This guide goes deeper than one video ever could. Grab it now from the first link in the description. You'll be glad that you did. Now, let's go back to those warning signs because I have more to share. This brings me to another warning sign that's particularly sneaky because it does not seem directly related to your digestive system at all, and it's iron deficiency, anemia. Now you might be wondering, what does anemia have to do with colon cancer? Let me connect the dots for you. Sometimes colon cancer don't cause obvious traumatic bleeding that you can see with your eyes. Instead, they cause chronic low-graded blood loss from a slowly bleeding tumor. Day after day, week after week, you're losing small amounts of blood that you never notice. But over time, this constant blood loss depletes your body's iron reserves. Your body needs iron to build and replenish the hemoglobin in your red blood cells, which is the protein that carries oxygen throughout your body. When you are constantly losing blood, and therefore losing iron, your blood cannot keep up with producing healthy red blood cells. That's what leads to iron deficiency anemia, where you feel tired, you feel weak, short of breath, and maybe a little dizzy. Now, colon cancer isn't the most common cause of iron deficiency anemia. It's usually caused by not getting enough iron in your diet, or heavy menstrual periods in women, or even kidney disease. But if you've been diagnosed with low iron and anemia, especially if you're a man who shouldn't be losing blood regularly like a woman would, colon cancer absolutely needs to be ruled out as a potential cause. Let me tell you about another symptom that people often live with for way too long without getting checked out by a doctor. A feeling of fullness after a bowel movement, or this persistent sensation that you haven't completely emptied your bowels. Is this constant feeling like you need to go to the bathroom even though you just went. Here's why this happens. As cancer grows, as that tumor grows, especially if it's located in the lower colon or in the rectum, it can press on the bowel wall or create a sensation that mimics stool remaining in your rectum. Your body feels like there is something there that needs to come out, even when there isn't. This symptom is really tricky because it's often mistaken for common gastrointestinal issues like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. People live with it for months, even years, thinking it's just IBS or stress or something that they ate. But if this feeling persists for several weeks without improvement, it could be an early sign of cancer trying to get your attention. Please pay attention. And speaking of symptoms that people dismiss as just normal digestive troubles, let's talk about excessive gas and bloating. Excuse me. Now, we all experience gas and bloating from time to time, especially after eating certain foods. But persistent, unexplained gas and bloating that doesn't go away, that's different. And it happens through several mechanisms. I have a problem with that word. When cancer is involved. If a cancer growth gets large enough, it can create a physical blockage in your colon. This blockage traps gas behind it, leading to uncomfortable bloating and abdominal discomfort that doesn't resolve like normal bloating and gas would. But there's another mechanism. Oh, I did it good. I did it right this time. At play here. That's really that's really interesting from a biological standpoint. These tumors can actually obstruct the normal digestion and fermentation of food in your colon, which disrupts the delicate balance of bacteria in your gut. Your gut microbiome is this incredible ecosystem of trillions of bacteria that help you digest food. And when that balance gets disrupted, it leads to more gas production and more bloating. Sometimes what happens is the partial blockage created by the tumor slows down how waste moves through your colon. This gives bacteria more time to ferment undigested food, which creates even more gas. So if you experience persistent bloating and you haven't made any recent changes to your diet, and that bloating continues for longer than a few weeks, that's a red flag that needs to be addressed and evaluated. Now, I'm going to tell you about the most common early sign of colon cancer, and this might surprise you. Are you ready for it? Well, the most common early signs is actually no sign at all. Complete absence of symptoms. Nothing. I know that sounds contradictory to everything that I've just told you, but here's the reality. Colon cancer has to be pretty advanced before it starts causing many of the symptoms we've been discussing throughout this video. Those early polyps, those initial cancer cells, they're growing silently without giving you any indication that something is wrong. You feel fine, you look fine, everything seems normal. And this is exactly why being aggressive with screening is so critically important. The absolute best time to find colon cancer is when you don't have any symptoms at all, when it's still in those early stages, high treatable stages. The earlier we find it, the higher your chances of survival. It's that simple. So, let's talk about screening, because that's the next step, because this is where we take back control of our health. Here in the United States, the recommendation is to start screening at age 45 for people at average risk of colon cancer. Now, you might have a few different options for how to get screened, and I want to walk you through them so that you can make an informed decision. The first line of defense is colonoscopy. This is a procedure where a long flexible tube with a camera is inserted into your rectum, and your gastroenterologist examines your entire colon looking for polyps or any abnormal tissue. And here's what makes colonoscopy so powerful. If they find any concerning polyps during the exam, they can remove them right then and there while you're doing the exam and send them for biopsy. Screening and treatment happening simultaneously is remarkable. But I'll be honest with you, colonoscopies do have some disadvantages that make some people hesitant. You have to do bowel preparation the day before the colonoscopy, which involves drinking a solution that clears out your entire digestive system. It's not pleasant. My husband did it before, and most people would rather skip it if they could. There's also a very tiny risk of complications like bleeding or perforation during the procedure. And since colonoscopies in the US are usually done under sedation, there's a small risk associated with the anesthesia itself. Now, if you're not excited about getting a colonoscopy, and I totally understand why you might not be there yet, there are other alternatives that you can discuss with your doctor. There are stool-based tests where you get a kit that tests your bowel movement for blood or DNA changes. That could indicate that colon cancer or large polyps are there. I did one about 2 years ago, and the result was good. The advantages of these stool tests are obvious. They are not invasive. They don't require any procedure or sedation. You can do them in the comfort and privacy of your own home, like I did. But the flip side is, they're not as good at detecting the polyps or early cancer compared to colonoscopy. And these tests need to be done more frequently, anywhere from yearly to every 3 years. depending on which test you choose. And just so you know, there are pros and cons to every type of screening method. But here's what I want you to take away from this. The most important thing is to get screened, period. Pick the method that you actually do. The best screening test is the one you'll complete, and that is so important. Now, 45 years old is the absolute latest that you should start screening if you're at average risk. But some of you need to start much earlier, believe it or not. And I want to make sure that you know if that applies to you. If you have inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you need to start screening earlier than 45. If you have a family member with a history of colon cancer or high-risk polyps, the recommendation is to start screening at age 40 instead of 45, or 10 years before the age your relative was diagnosed, whichever comes first. Let me give you an example to make this crystal clear. If you have a relative who was diagnosed with colon cancer at age 35, then you need to start screening 10 years before that, which means starting as early as age 25. That might sound shockingly young, but remember what I told you at the beginning of this video. Colon cancer rates in young people have doubled. You cannot afford to be complacent about this. There's more nuance to all of this depending on your specific risk factors and which degree of relative was diagnosed. But your doctor will be able to guide you on the best test for your situation and the right time to start screening. Look, I know this has been a lot of information to process, and talking about the big C is never easy. But knowledge is power, and awareness saves lives. As important as it is to recognize the early warning signs of colon cancer, what's even more important is knowing how to prevent it in the first place. That's why I'm going to be making another video soon, diving deep into the different causes of colon cancer, especially in young people, and the specific steps that you can start taking today to lower your risk. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss that video, which is coming up soon, because prevention is always better than detection. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear this. Don't forget to grab the comprehensive guide titled Healing Over 40 Using Natural Remedies. It is the first link in the description below this video. You're going to thank me later for this one. Trust me. Until next time, take care of your health and listen to what your body is trying to tell you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.